Hey guys. Tonight's story begins with porridge that doesn't move and bread that could double as a weapon. You're sitting at a wooden table surrounded by people chewing like it's their job. The woman who made it smiles proudly while you try to decide if chewing counts as penance. Across the room, someone dips their bread into the bowl like it's a science experiment, and you realize this isn't breakfast. This is survival training. You swallow, the wall cracks, and a goat in the corner nods like it's seen this before. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The first thing you notice is the itch. It starts somewhere behind your left knee and spreads like a scandal. The second thing you notice is the smell, an aromatic blend of sweat, old straw, damp wood, and something that might once have been cheese, but now feels like it's achieved a higher, angrier form. Your mouth tastes like someone else's dream. Bad dream, possibly involving turnips. You try to sit up and immediately discover the ceiling is lower than expected, and your forehead makes intimate contact with a beam that has seen empires rise and fall. Dust sifts down, like it's ashamed to be part of this. You blink. Once, twice. The room doesn't improve. Slanted walls, a slatted window that lets in just enough light to judge you, and a rickety stool with a crack so wide it's developed its own politics. Your bed is not a bed so much as a rude pile of straw held together by hope and goat hair. Possibly, the goat is still here. Something warm shifts near your ankle. You lift the blanket, such as it is more of a suggestion than a fabric, and find a rat curled in your sock like it pays rent. It blinks at you with the audacity of someone who's been here longer. You whisper no and shake your foot. It doesn't leave. It climbs up your leg instead. Outside, someone is yelling. It's not clear who they're yelling at or why, but their voice carries the tone of someone who deeply mistrusts the sky. The sun is rising in the kind of aggressive, unapologetic way that only medieval suns know how. Bright, smug, a celestial tax auditor. The rooster, surprisingly, is silent, possibly too traumatized to participate today. Or perhaps he has unionized. You stand, or try to. Your knee makes a sound like a small branch giving up. You're wearing what passes for sleepwear, a long shirt that might once have been white, now the color of old tea and consequences. Your feet hit the floorboards, which creak under your weight in a way that suggests they were not consulted first. Every step kicks up a fresh note of mildew, as if the room is sighing at your choices. You shuffle to the window and push it open. The hinges groan like they remember better tenants. Outside, the village stretches its limbs in various states of discomfort. A cow wanders diagonally. A pig sneezes and knocks over a bucket. A child licks a fence post and is told to stop, though no one sounds optimistic that he will. Two women near a well are already arguing, possibly about goats, possibly about theology. It's hard to tell. You glance back at your room, hoping maybe it's gotten better in the last 10 seconds. It hasn't. If anything, the rat looks more comfortable. Your clothes are draped over a chair that should not be bearing weight. The tunic is stiff, the hose are uneven, and your one boot has something living in it. You shake it out. Something scurries. You decide not to follow it. There's no mirror, but if there were, it would weep. Your hair is doing a thing, but not the same thing all over. One side has decided to embrace the wind. The other is flat with despair. You splash water on your face from a chipped bowl and immediately regret it. It's colder than most crimes. You sniff. You hope that was just the water. Downstairs, Someone is burning something and swearing about it like it's personal. A woman yells your name or something that sounds enough like it and demands you bring the pail. You don't know where the pail is. You don't know what the pail is, but your feet are already moving because in this time period, hesitation is the cousin of being shouted at again. You trip on the last stair and land face first in a basket of laundry that smells like it gave up halfway through drying. Someone claps, possibly ironically. You rise, dignity in shreds, hair now adorned with a sock that isn't yours. The day has begun. The air tastes of soot, cabbage, and judgment. And somewhere, beneath it all, your spine quietly whispers, "This was a mistake." You awaken with a mouth that feels like it's been lined with burlap and confessions. It tastes like last week's bread and a distant memory of onions. Your tongue feels furry, your teeth feel suspicious, and your breath could legally qualify as a warning. Instinctively, you reach for a toothbrush. There isn't one. Of course there isn't. Instead, on a rickety shelf, beside a jug of water and a crust of what might have once aspired to be soap, you find a twig. Just a twig. It doesn't even look hygienic. It looks like something a squirrel gave up on. You stare at it. It stares back. There's a faint smear of something on the end. Maybe someone else's attempt at cleanliness. Maybe tree sap. Maybe death itself. Nearby, a small clay dish holds a pile of ashes that smell faintly of goat and charcoal. Despair. You poke it. It puffs slightly, like it's insulted by your hesitation. There is also moss, not on purpose, just clinging to the wall like it's renting space and has no plans to leave. You think maybe this is a mistake, but the taste in your mouth insists that you do something, anything, before the village collectively decides you are cursed. You venture outside in search of a solution. The morning air is damp, full of smoke and distant judgment. A woman is hunched over a bucket near the well, her sleeves rolled, her mouth wide, and her hands deep in what appears to be a bundle of greenery. She is vigorously scrubbing her gums with a wad of moss, muttering something that sounds religious but also mildly accusatory. Her eyes meet yours for a moment. She nods once, like a priest granting absolution through discomfort. You gather the courage to copy her. You pick a patch of moss from the stone wall and dip it in the water bucket that may or may not have been recently visited by a toad. It drips mournfully in your hand. You squint at it, raise it to your lips, and begin. It is immediately worse than you imagined. It tastes like wet wood and crushed apology. You gag, but persist. The moss disintegrates slightly, and something crunchy happens, which you hope was just a twig and not an insect with goals. You rinse with the water. It tastes like old iron and disappointment. A man nearby sneezes so hard he drops his pail and mutters about demons in the wind. Determined, you move to the next phase. You retrieve the twig. You've seen people chew them in old paintings. You didn't realize those paintings were depictions of personal tragedy. You bite down and begin to scrape. The twig does not clean your teeth. It exfoliates your soul. It splits. You spit out splinters. You try to use the ashes next. You dip the twig, now reduced to a slightly damp stick of failure, into the pile of soot and scrub again. Now your mouth tastes like a burnt fence and betrayal. The ashes coat your teeth in a way that makes your gums ache in anticipation. A small child walks by, takes one look at you, and runs away screaming something about ghosts. A dog sniffs you and changes its mind. You miss mint with a desperate longing. You miss the quiet fizz of toothpaste tubes. You miss the tiny bristles of a brush that didn't come from a tree you had to negotiate with. You miss mouthwash, fluoride, dental floss, and the unspoken agreement that certain parts of your mouth should never feel crunchy. The woman with the moss is now gargling something that smells like vinegar and boiled bark. She offers you a handful. You shake your head. She shrugs, spits into the grass, and walks away like a warrior who's just finished a duel. Your teeth feel raw. Your tongue feels like it's been dragged across gravel. Your lips are dry. Your breath is worse, and you're starting to think the real hygiene in this era is just not opening your mouth at all. You give up. You rinse one final time, swish the iron-tinted water around like you're swearing allegiance to poor choices, and spit. It lands near your foot with a sullen splat. You wipe your mouth with a sleeve that is, technically, fabric. A man walks past, sniffs, pauses, and nods with mild approval. "You'll live," he says. It doesn't feel like a compliment. You ask where the bathroom is with the polite desperation of someone trying not to panic. A woman stirring something untrustworthy in a pot gives you a look usually reserved for liars and nobles. Another man, barefoot and proudly unaware of soap, chuckles so hard he spits into the fire. A child giggles and runs away, clutching a turnip like it knows what you're about to find out. Finally, an elderly woman with a shawl the color of bad choices jabs a crooked finger toward the edge of the field and mutters, "That way. Mind the geese." Then she hands you a square of wool with a texture that feels personally offensive. There is no follow-up, no explanation, just the wool, the warning, and a sense of doom clinging to your boots. You walk, slowly at first, then faster, because nature is no longer asking politely. The path turns to mud. The mud turns to something more philosophical. You pass a fence that has given up, and a tree that seems to judge you from its bark alone. Finally, you see it. A ditch. There is no structure, no door, no privacy. Just a shallow groove in the earth, lined with wilted grass and broken dignity. A stick leans nearby, possibly as a marker, or possibly in case you lose the will to go on. The wool is in your hand. You hate it more than anything you've ever known. It has the softness of sandpaper and the emotional warmth of a debt collector. You look around. There is, of course, no toilet paper, no seat, no plumbing. There is, however, a goose. It stands a few feet away, still as a statue and twice as judgmental. Its eyes are small, round, and full of backstory. It honks once, not loudly, but with the quiet menace of someone who has nothing left to lose. You inch toward the ditch, trying to act casual, like you belong here, like you were born for this. The goose steps closer. You step faster. You crouch, trying to find a position that doesn't compromise every shred of dignity you have left. There is no such position. The ditch smells like historical trauma and fermented decision-making. You make a noise that might be a prayer. The goose does not move. It watches. You are not sure if it is judging you or waiting for you to make a mistake. You suspect both. Somewhere nearby, a twig snaps. A dog barks. The wind changes direction in a way that feels ominous. You try to move quickly. You fumble the wool. It falls into the ditch like a martyr. You freeze. The goose takes a step closer, flaps its wings once, and emits a low, unsettling sound, like a bagpipe remembering a war. You grab a leaf. It is the wrong leaf. There is no right leaf. You shuffle back from the ditch, half crouched, half haunted, and swear softly into your sleeve. You do not make eye contact with the goose. The goose does not break its stare. You suspect it has written about you in its diary. You do not want to read what it says. By the time you return to the village, you have walked slower than usual and thought about every choice that led to this moment. Your boots are damp in ways boots should not be damp. The wool square is gone, lost to the ages or claimed by the earth as payment. No one asks how it went. No one has to. They can tell. A child points. A woman crosses herself. The man with no shoes just laughs again, harder this time. You say nothing. You just sit on a wooden stool that does not forgive and stare at a wall that doesn't blink. And from across the field, faint but unmistakable, the goose honks. Once, with meaning. You are handed a bowl of something that calls itself porridge but looks like it was created in a backroom deal between a swamp and a glue factory. It doesn't slosh. It doesn't move. It holds its shape like it's proud of its density. A spoon is already sticking out of it, though it's unclear if that's because someone left it there or because it just couldn't escape. Steam curls from the top, the kind that suggests a warning rather than warmth. You stare at it long enough to wonder if it's watching you back. The woman who made it beams at you with the confidence of someone who hasn't tasted it in years. "Hearty," she says, as though that's an answer to several questions you haven't asked. You nod, because manners are still a thing, even if flavor isn't. A man beside you is already shoveling it into his mouth with the enthusiasm of someone either truly hungry or completely numb. You take a spoonful and lift it with care. It stretches slightly, then snaps. The smell is vaguely familiar, something between boiled socks and punishment. You taste it. Immediately, your soul flinches. It is warm, but not in a comforting way, more in the way of being soothed by a radiator. The texture is grainy, yet somehow slimy. It clings to your teeth like it's trying to become part of your dental plan. There's no sugar, no fruit, not even a whisper of seasoning. It is pure, elemental blandness, like someone described oats to a ghost and then dared it to cook. Your tongue recoils, your throat negotiates, and your stomach signs a waiver. You swallow because you are being watched. The bread arrives next, a round, solid lump that has the exact shape and emotional weight of a river stone. You tap it lightly on the table. The table winces. You take a bite, or rather, you attempt one. The crust doesn't yield so much as resist. You chew, and then stop chewing, because nothing is happening. You get the sense that this loaf might outlive you. Someone across the table dips theirs into the porridge and gnaws thoughtfully like a goat with tenure. There is no butter, no jam, no joy. Just bread, porridge, and the quiet knowledge that this will not be the worst part of your day. You glance around. Everyone else seems to accept this fate. They chew with the dull resignation of people who know it's either this or a cold turnip later. A boy dips a finger into his bowl, lifts it to the light, and watches it drip back in slow motion like a scene from a culinary horror film. No one stops him. You look down at your own bowl and consider escape. You could fake a choking fit. You could claim you're fasting for spiritual reasons. You could throw it out the window and blame the goose. But before you can act, an old man beside you says, "Finish it," builds character. You look into his eyes and see the haunted glimmer of someone who's been built entirely out of character and porridge. You take another bite. It goes down with the enthusiasm of a stone skipping across a lake of regret. The spoon trembles in your hand. You glance at the bread again, lift it, and on a whim, hurl it at the wall. There is a dull thud. A dent appears. The bread remains intact. The woman gasps. The wall has lost. No one speaks. The fire crackles. A baby begins to cry softly, perhaps sensing that something terrible has occurred. You apologize under your breath and try to eat quietly, which is difficult because every bite sounds like gravel in a barrel. A dog under the table sniffs your bowl and walks away. You finish, eventually. Not because you're full, but because the bowl is empty and your will to argue has dissolved into the mush. Your jaw aches. Your palate is confused, and your stomach makes a sound like a question mark. You place the spoon down gently, unsure if it deserves thanks or therapy. Breakfast is over. You are not stronger, but you are changed. You get dressed because it's expected of you, not because anything about this process feels right. Your clothes are handed over in a lumpy pile with the energy of a warning. The tunic, at first glance, appears to be made of cloth, but upon closer inspection is actually woven from the concept of discomfort. It's stiff in some places, limp in others, and carries the smell of a stranger's uncle who once wrestled a badger and lost. You lift it to your face and immediately regret breathing through your nose. The undergarments are worse. They're less of a garment and more of a suggestion, a loose, scratchy thing that seems specifically engineered to find parts of your anatomy you've never had reason to be aware of and introduce them to chafing. The moment it touches your skin, your body begins filing complaints. You put it on anyway, because what else are you going to do? Return it. The woman who handed it to you also handed you a wooden spoon and a look that said she'd fought off bandits and once bit a wolf. You are not returning anything. Then come the hose, which are not hose so much as long tubes of itchy optimism, held up by a mysterious network of ties and fear. You attempt to wrap them around your legs like you've seen in the woodcuts, only to discover that you are not a woodcut man. You are a soft, confused, modern person in a time where pants are apparently optional but judgment is not. Eventually, you succeed in creating a kind of leg cocoon situation. It's not dignified, but it's attached, and that's what passes for fashion here. The tunic goes over your head with all the grace of a burlap sack, staging a coup. You emerge, gasping and tangled. There is no stretch to the fabric. There is only resistance. You force your arms through and discover that the seams are not aligned with any known laws of physics or comfort. One sleeve is slightly tighter than the other. The neck hole scratches like it holds a grudge, and the entire garment sits on your shoulders like you owe it money. Then, the shoes. They are wooden. Not like clogs, not like fashion. Just wood. Boxy, heavy, clunky abominations carved out of regret and nailed together with the craftsmanship of a man who hated feet. You try to slip one on and immediately question your commitment to walking. There is no cushioning, no give, just the distinct awareness that your toes are now hostages. Every step feels like walking across a floor made of stones and decisions. They creak, loudly, like a haunted house on a windy night. You take 3 steps and develop a limp. No one seems surprised. You check yourself in the reflection of a basin filled with water and faint disappointment. You look like you've just wandered out of a time travel accident and been forced into manual labor before finishing your sentence. Your hair is still doing whatever it wants. Your tunic hangs like a sad curtain, and your shoes add 3 inches to your height but subtract all dignity. And still, you itch. It starts in one place, somewhere innocuous, like your shoulder blade, but then it spreads, down your spine, around your ribs, behind your knees, even somehow under your fingernails. The fabric touches you in places it has no business reaching. You scratch once, then again, then more furiously, until you resemble a bear trying to shed its winter coat. Someone walks by and snorts. "City folk," they mutter, as though that explains everything. You try to hold your head high, but the tunic has shrunk somehow, and your wooden shoes keep catching on unseen ridges in the dirt. You shuffle forward, vaguely upright, all motion and no confidence. This is what you're wearing now. This is your life. You are dressed for the part, and the part is discomfort layered in linen and shame. You feel like a scarecrow's less successful cousin. And the worst part? You're told this is your good outfit. You try to smile at someone. Just a simple, modern, friendly smile. The kind you might give a cashier or a neighbor or a dog with good posture. But here, in the damp courtyard of a village that looks like it was built by accident and then immediately regretted, that smile lands like a thrown shoe. The man you aim it at freezes mid-spit. His eyes narrow. He steps back like you've just announced a fondness for eating frogs whole. You raise your hand in a half wave, the international gesture for "I'm harmless," but it's interpreted here as either a threat or a summoning ritual. The man scurries off, muttering something that sounds like plague-faced. You keep walking, determined not to let one interaction define your morning. You nod at a woman with a basket. She tightens her grip on it, as though you might steal her turnips with your mind. You compliment someone's cow. He looks at you like the cow is his wife. A child stares at you from behind a hay cart. You smile at him too, a little wider this time, trying to project warmth, humanity, approachability. He does not smile back. He produces a turnip from somewhere, possibly an infinite turnip pocket, and hurls it with the precision of a boy who has trained for this moment his entire life. It hits your knee. It's not a large turnip, but it's emotionally devastating. You yelp. He laughs. 2 other children join him, like small agents of chaos drawn by the scent of a stranger's failure. You try to speak, to explain, to say you're just trying to blend in, make friends, survive the day without being accused of sorcery. But the words don't come out right. They tumble into the thick air like foreign coins in a local well. An old woman appears, her shawl billowing slightly in the breeze like it's caught between worlds. She looks at you, squints, and spits over her shoulder. Not casually, deliberately, like punctuation. Then she mutters something to the sky, as if filing a report with forces greater than herself. You don't catch the exact words, but you're fairly sure the general tone was ominous forecast. You begin to walk faster. Every face you pass is either suspicious or openly disgusted. You hear the word hexed thrown around more than once. A man leans on a pitchfork and refuses to blink. You smile at a dog. It growls. You try not to take that personally, but it's difficult when even animals sense something is off. You adjust your tunic. It rides up. You pull it down. It rides back up. There is no dignity here, only friction and the lingering suspicion that everyone knows something you don't. A group of women weaving baskets pause as you walk past. One of them crosses herself. Another whispers into the ear of the third, who gasps as though you've just walked by holding hands with death himself. You glance behind you, just in case. There's nothing, just dust and shame. You start noticing the shawls now. They're everywhere. Each one a different color, but somehow all conveying the same quiet menace. They're worn by the elders, the mothers, the women with strange herbal knowledge and louder than average chickens. They seem to communicate with their eyes, or their knitting needles, or some ancient telepathic system of judgment. You try to look, uninteresting. That fails immediately. You trip on your wooden shoe, flail, and catch yourself on a barrel full of onions. The onions spill. The shawled women gasp in unison, like a choir of disappointment. You bow your head and mumble something about needing water. No one believes you. They think you're hiding something. They think you've seen things, communed with something, disrespected a sacred boundary of fence or goose or fog. A man offers you a side eye that could pickle vegetables. You give up and shuffle away, shoulders hunched, eyes low, paranoia blooming like mold in a damp pantry. You don't know who you offended or how, but the message is clear. You are not welcome. You are not trusted. And if a shawl ever makes its way onto your shoulders, it will not be for warmth. It will be for trial. You decide it's time to contribute, to prove your worth. To show the villagers you're not just a strange-smelling interloper with bad shoes and suspicious vibes. You raise your hand tentatively, heroically, and announce that you'd like to help. Heads turn. A few snorts are stifled. One man immediately walks away. But someone, a stout woman with arms like baked bread and eyes that have seen plague, nods and says, "Fine, start with the rake." The rake is older than some buildings. It has fewer teeth than is ideal, most of them worn down to nubs or outright missing, and its handle feels like it's already halfway to splinters. You hold it carefully, trying to radiate competence. You are told to rake hay. You nod, as if you have any idea how to rake anything that isn't leaves off a suburban sidewalk. Your first pull is too hard. The rake lodges itself in a lump of packed straw and then snaps backward with the speed and grace of a catapult. You fall. Not in a dramatic way, in the slow, tragic kind of way where your knees bend and your soul gives up before gravity even finishes the job. The rake handle breaks in half. The straw looks better than it did before, which feels like a personal insult. Someone watching sighs. Someone else mutters something about city fingers. You don't know what that means, but you feel judged on a molecular level. You offer to fix the rake. They tell you no. They tell you to get water instead. You feel oddly relieved. Water sounds manageable, familiar. You've encountered it before. They hand you a wooden bucket that feels heavier than it looks, and you trudge toward the well with the grim resolve of a person who's just remembered that wells have no safety standards. The stone edge rises before you like an ancient warning. There's a rope and a pulley, and a crank that groans when you touch it, like even it doubts your intentions. You start lowering the bucket. It drops too fast. You panic and yank the rope, which causes the bucket to swing wildly and bounce against the side of the well, making a sound like metal trying to quit its job. Somehow, you retrieve it with a couple inches of murky water and the confidence of a man who's never succeeded at anything. You lean forward to inspect it, maybe pour it into another bucket, maybe admire it. You're not sure anymore. That's when your foot slips, just a little, enough to tilt your center of gravity, enough to remind you that balance is not a medieval priority. You fall in. It's not a graceful fall. You don't plunge. You clatter. You scrape down the side, knees banging, tunic catching on something sharp, and you land not with a splash but a kind of full-body insult to the concept of depth. The water is freezing. The bottom is slime. There is no dignity left. Up above, a head appears, silhouetted against the light. Not again, they mutter, which raises several questions, none of which you're emotionally prepared to explore. You yell. You sputter. You think about diseases. Hands eventually haul you out, wet, shivering, and covered in things you can't identify. You smell like mildew and failure. Your wooden shoes are gone, claimed by the ancient aquatic spirits of bad decisions. Your tunic clings to you in all the wrong places. No one offers you a towel. You try to laugh it off. A weak chuckle escapes you like steam from a cracked pot. No one laughs back. They hand you a new task. Stir the barley mash, they say. You eye the rake handle still lying broken in the straw and wonder how quickly things will go wrong this time. You decide to reset your reputation with something low risk. Chores, you think. Good, solid, salt-of-the-earth chores. The kind of thing anyone can do with a little effort and a positive attitude. You announce your intent like a knight volunteering for a quest, except instead of dragons, you face laundry. There is no cheering. There is only the woman in charge of washing, who squints at you like she's evaluating whether your soul is clean enough to scrub linens near. She hands you a shirt. It's not white. You're not sure it ever was. It's stiff in parts and alarmingly soft in others. She points to a bucket of gray water that may have started life as river runoff, but has since gone on a character development arc. There is no soap, only a hard stone and what you assume is faith. You dunk the shirt, swirl it around, and immediately lose feeling in your hands. The water is glacial. Your fingers turn a noble shade of corpse. You begin scrubbing. The shirt resists. The grime fights back. The fabric tries to fold itself in protest. You keep at it. By the time you finish one sleeve, your knuckles are scraped raw, your nails are bent into new shapes, and your forearms are shaking like a leaf that owes someone money. You look up, triumphant and soaked. The woman frowns and says, "That was the rag we use for the pig's foot." You do not cry. You are stronger than that now. Slightly moldier, but stronger. Farming seems like the next best thing. Dirt, you can handle. You're mostly made of it at this point. A man hands you a hoe and gestures toward a patch of field that looks suspiciously like a battlefield. You nod, adopt a wide stance, and begin hacking at the soil with what you hope is rustic charm. The hoe disagrees. 2 swings in, the handle cracks. On the third, the metal head snaps clean off and flies into the air, disappearing somewhere into a hedge with a sound like a warning from nature itself. The man stares. You hand him the handle and say nothing. He says, "Will, find you something else," which brings you to the cow. You approach the animal with the naive optimism of someone who has only ever seen cows on packaging. She watches you with eyes that suggest she's about to do something legally questionable. You sit beside her, tentatively grab the bucket, and reach toward the udder like someone defusing a bomb. She shifts. You pause. She flicks her tail. You flinch. You begin the milking motion you vaguely remember from a documentary you watched once while half asleep. Nothing happens. You try again. She makes a sound that is somewhere between a snort and a warning. You try a third time. That's when her leg moves. The bucket is kicked. Milk flies. You fall backward, clutching your arm. The cow looks satisfied. You swear you see her smirk. Someone claps sarcastically from a distance. You no longer care who. You are told gently but firmly that perhaps chores are not your gift. Perhaps you are better suited to quieter things. Sitting, maybe. Just sitting. In the shade. Not near anything sharp or alive or valuable. You nod. Sitting sounds safe. You sit. You fall off the stool. You try again. You sit, and the stool tips. You flail, catch a nearby basket, and fall into it. Eggs crack. The hen screams. Somewhere, a baby begins to cry, even though you're fairly certain there was no baby here 5 minutes ago. You extricate yourself and sit on the ground instead, arms around your knees, quietly absorbing failure like it's a warm bath. A man walks by, glances at you, and says, "That's probably for the best." You watch the village move around you. You breathe in the scent of manure and cooked barley. You think maybe tomorrow you'll try something easier, like sword fighting. You eat the turnip because it's there, and the alternatives seem to involve things with more legs than you're comfortable acknowledging. It's not cooked. It's not even particularly clean. It crunches with the texture of something that once dreamed of being edible but was talked out of it by a cruel upbringing and poor soil. It tastes like the earth, not in a wholesome, grounded way, but in a literal, dirt in your teeth, possibly still growing way. There's a bitterness to it that suggests it knows your secrets, that it doesn't approve. You chew because you must. You swallow because pride won't let you spit it out in front of a crowd that already believes you're cursed. A man with 3 teeth and no eyebrows nods at you like you've passed a test. You are not comforted. Next, you are handed cheese. It's beige, waxy, and sweating, which raises questions you are not equipped to answer. You bite into it carefully, hoping for a mild tang, maybe a rustic sharpness. What you get instead is a direct assault. It's sour, gritty, and unexpectedly warm. The flavor hits you in stages, first insult, then offense, then betrayal. You wonder if cheese can go to war. You're fairly certain this one already has. You ask what kind of cheese it is. The response is just a shrug and the words, "goat adjacent." There is bread, but it is less bread and more weapon. Dense, chewy, and harder than emotional vulnerability. You test it against the table. The table loses a splinter. A child uses a chunk of it to hammer a nail into a board. You nibble cautiously and immediately understand why most people in this time period are missing teeth. You attempt to be grateful. You say, "This is hearty." They beam, proud and pleased. A man with a beard like tangled roots offers you a bowl of stew. It steams, which is promising. It also smells like desperation and mushrooms. You ask, as politely as possible, "Does this have meat?" There is a long pause. Not the kind of pause where someone is thinking. The kind where someone is calculating how much they're legally obligated to disclose. The cook, who might also be the town's tanner, executioner, and midwife, judging by the tools hanging from her belt, finally says, "Define meat." You do not press. You take the bowl. You stir the stew. It is mostly liquid, partly chunk, and entirely mysterious. There's something floating that could be a turnip or a knuckle. You try a bite. It is chewy and confusing. There's a hint of something that used to be an animal, or maybe just lived near one. The broth has a saltiness to it that makes you question the nearby well. You tell yourself it's protein. Something crunches unexpectedly. You put the bowl down and make vague noises of satisfaction. A small boy stares at you and says, "That used to be Henry." You do not ask follow-up questions. The meal continues. More turnips appear. Pickled things arrive in jars that smell like consequences. You're offered something called blood pudding, which looks like a dare and feels like a trap. You decline. The old woman from earlier mutters and crosses herself. You sit back, stomach twisting slightly, mouth coated in a film of unanswered questions. The food doesn't just lack seasoning, it lacks forgiveness. Everything is either too bland, too sour, or vaguely sentient. You are full, but not nourished, fed, but not safe. Later, your stomach gurgles, not in hunger, in warning. The cheese has plans. You see the goat and make the first mistake of the day, which is saying out loud, "Aw, look at the little guy." The second mistake is approaching it like you're in a petting zoo and not, as it turns out, on the sacred stomping grounds of Barnabas, destroyer of joy. You crouch, smiling, like a fool, extending your hand in a gesture you think radiates trust and affection. The goat interprets this as a declaration of war. It doesn't charge. That would be too predictable. It saunters up, calm as a monk, eyes locked on yours with the cold intelligence of a tax collector who smells blood in the water. You hold your breath. It sniffs your palm. You exhale. Then it headbutts your knee with the force of a battering ram wielded by a creature that's been skipping leg day for precisely 0 days in its life. You crumple. The crowd, because of course there's a crowd, gasps in unison. A child drops a turnip. A crone leans forward like she's watching the final round of a tournament. You try to stand, but the goat is not finished. It circles you once, triumphant, and begins to eat your sleeve with the nonchalance of someone enjoying a snack during a casual public humiliation. You try to pull your arm away, but the fabric is already gone, swallowed into the void of its terrible hunger. You're left with a drool-dampened stump of wool and the haunting knowledge that you've just been partially consumed by a farm animal. You lock eyes with it again. It burps. Children cheer. Someone starts clapping. You sit down slowly, careful not to provoke further violence. The goat follows you and attempts to climb your back. You swat at it, not with force but with the gentle, useless flapping of someone who has lost all sense of dominance. It hops off, insulted by your audacity, and trots away with a jaunty arrogance, tail flicking like punctuation at the end of a very public sentence. You assess the damage. Your knee throbs, your sleeve is history, and your pride is scattered across the dirt like breadcrumbs for emotional scavengers. You feel the eyes of the village on you, the subtle shift from suspicion to entertainment. You're not the outsider anymore. You're the village fool. You try to laugh it off, but the sound that comes out is the kind of wheeze, usually reserved for ghosts who died mid-sneeze. A little girl walks past and pats your shoulder. "It likes you," she says solemnly, as if that's ever a good thing. You manage a nod, still sitting in the mud, staring at your new enemy as it headbutts a fence post, just for fun. A man approaches, chewing something unidentifiable and hard. "Barnabas don't like folks who smell like books," he says. You want to ask how he knows that. You want to ask a lot of things. But instead, you say, "Of course," because that feels like the only appropriate response when livestock asserts dominance. You limp back toward the hut you've been haunting all day. The goat follows at a distance, not close enough to be affectionate, but close enough to remind you who won. You glance over your shoulder. It's chewing something. You don't want to know what. It might be your dignity. You decide to never pet anything again. You sneeze once, just once, and the entire square goes quiet. Not a polite, curious quiet. Not even the uneasy hush of an awkward toast. No, this is the silence of people, wondering if they're about to witness something historically significant and probably fatal. Birds stop chirping. A dog whimpers. Somewhere, a chicken lays an egg out of pure tension. You sniff. A man wearing a robe that doubles as a tablecloth clutches a wooden cross and starts chanting something in Latin, or possibly a recipe. He lunges at you with holy water that smells like regret and pond. He sprinkles it on your face like you're a salad in need of seasoning, muttering faster and louder with every drop. You try to explain that it's just seasonal allergies, But the word allergies has not yet been invented and sounds suspiciously close to allegiance, which is not ideal when the village is trying to decide if you're possessed or just annoying. Then the garlic arrives. You don't know her name. You never will. But she is old, she is swift, and she is absolutely sure you need garlic rubbed on your forehead immediately. Her hands are rough, her aim is true, and before you can object, you smell like an appetizer. She nods solemnly and says, "To ward off the humors." You do not know what humors are in this context, but they are apparently very active near your face. A child points and whispers, "I saw them talk to the goat." Someone gasps. You attempt to clarify that you did, in fact, speak to the goat, but not in a spell-casting kind of way, more in a please don't destroy me again kind of way. It does not help. A woman clutching a basket of questionable eggs hisses and forms a sign with her fingers that might be a ward or might be very rude. You back away slowly, but the crowd follows. It is no longer a village, it is an audience, and you are today's matinee. Someone loudly wonders whether witches sneeze. A man counters that demons sneeze too. A third suggests that maybe you're just sick, and is immediately shushed with the intensity of a nation repressing logic. You consider running, but you're still sore from the goat incident and mildly concussed from laundry. So you do what any self-respecting time traveler would do in your place. You smile, hold up your hands and say, "Bless you." They shriek. A bell rings. You didn't see a bell before. You don't know who's ringing it or why it sounds exactly like doom. A hunched man holding a staff taller than you hobbles toward the square. You assume he is some kind of local authority, possibly the village elder, possibly the guy who just likes drama. Either way, he has one working eye, and it is aimed directly at your soul. He sniffs once, loudly, and declares, "They've been touched by air spirits." You don't know what that means, but the mood shifts. A few people cross themselves. One man starts tying knots in a rope, either to hang you or contain you. You're not clear on the details. Someone mentions leeches. Someone else starts preparing a fire. You cough, just once. That was a mistake. They form a circle, a protective circle, they say, though no one is being protected from you. Just from the air you apparently infected with your demonic windpipes. You try to joke, "Guess I'm a breath of fresh air, huh?" But no one laughs. The priest throws more water. You taste algae and fear. Eventually, the goat arrives. Barnabas. He looks at you, looks at the circle, and lies down peacefully at your feet. You are doomed. You sneeze again. The blacksmith hands you a hammer that looks like it was forged from the disappointment of giants. You grasp it with both hands, confident, steady, a brave, modern soul ready to prove yourself among the soot-covered titans of industry. You lift. It moves approximately 2 inches before gravity reminds you that your arm muscles were mostly built for typing and carrying takeout. Something shifts in your spine with the subtle crackle of a haunted floorboard, and suddenly your posture resembles that of a shrimp in crisis. You make a sound. It is not a strong sound. The blacksmith pauses mid-swing, watching you with the same expression one might reserve for a rat wearing a crown. His mustache twitches, possibly with pity, though more likely with repressed amusement. "Soft," he mutters, not unkindly. More like he's diagnosing a piece of undercooked meat. You try to smile, but your lower back is staging a rebellion, and your upper lip is sweating betrayal. Still, you insist on helping. You insist because you are stubborn and delusional, and you have something to prove to a man who hasn't blinked in 5 minutes. So when he gestures toward the coal pile, you nod with misplaced heroism. You grab the nearest shovel and begin scooping, which is fine, until you try to carry it across the room and realize that coal, unlike dignity, has weight. A lot of it. And also, it spills. It spills everywhere, and then it spreads, like guilt, in an effort to fix the mistake. You scoop the coal back up, using a speed and enthusiasm that absolutely no one asked for. You move too fast. You misjudge your steps. You bump the bellows. You knock a lantern. The lantern tips. The fire leaps. The blacksmith does not yell. He does not panic. He simply removes his apron, sighs deeply from somewhere beneath his ribcage, and points to the exit like a man who's seen this before and does not need to see it again. You stomp the flames with what's left of your dignity. The fire dies with a hiss, but the damage is done. The floor is scorched. The coals are scattered like the dreams of apprentices past. A wheel of iron that used to resemble a horseshoe is now something closer to a sad, metallic pretzel. The blacksmith surveys the wreckage, chewing the inside of his cheek like it's trying to escape. From outside, someone shouts, "Is it the forge again?" The blacksmith answers with a grunt that might mean yes, or might mean, "Leave me to mourn." You are handed a bucket and told to go draw water, not because the fire is still burning, but because the blacksmith needs something to pour on his sense of loss. As you leave, you hear laughter. Not cruel, just tired. The kind of laughter that comes from a man who has accepted that chaos wears soft hands and city shoes. By the end of the hour, you are known by a new name. You are no longer the stranger. You are the incident. Children whisper it like a ghost story. The goat looks at you with renewed suspicion. You sit outside the forge, soot-covered and soul-damp, wondering how many centuries it takes to rebuild a reputation in a town where the highlight of the week was watching you nearly burn down the only source of metalwork for 50 miles. You consider trying again tomorrow. But your back says no. So does the blacksmith. Midday arrives without ceremony. There are no lunch breaks here, no cozy cafes or thoughtfully curated cheese boards. There is only the sun, glaring down like it's auditioning for the role of God, and your stomach making sounds that suggest internal rebellion. You look around for signs of nourishment and find none. Just people gnawing on things that may or may not have once moved under their own power. One man eats what looks like a boot. You can't be sure it isn't. You ask if there's lunch. They look at you like you just asked where the elevator is. A woman hands you something wrapped in a leaf and calls it a pie. She says it with pride, the way someone might announce they've caught a dragon with their bare hands. You accept it politely because you're starving and vaguely afraid of her. It is not a pie. It is, at best, a warning. The crust is hard enough to qualify as medieval armor. The filling is gray and mysterious and smells faintly of onion, fear, and something pickled against its will. You take a bite because your body is crying out for calories, and this seems like the only available option that isn't dirt or your own tongue. It crunches in a way no food should. Your molars scream. The taste is complex, by which you mean it has layers of confusion. There's salt, there's bitterness, there's an herb you suspect is just grass, and something chewy that might be meat, but also might be disappointment. You chew for what feels like a season. The woman watches you like a hawk who knows what it fed you. You nod politely and say, in a tone reserved for hostage videos. She beams, proud. You swallow. It does not go quietly. Your stomach registers the intruder and begins negotiations that quickly break down. The sensation is immediate and intense. Your insides begin reorganizing themselves into a protest march. You sit down to process what you've done, both emotionally and biologically. A nearby man offers you a sip of something in a wooden cup. You take it, thinking maybe it's water. It is not. It's ale, or what ale would be if it were brewed in a boot and seasoned with regret. Your eyes water. Your throat contemplates resignation. The sun climbs higher, and people return to their various chores, hauling, hoeing, hammering, herding. No one naps. No one relaxes. The concept of break doesn't exist here unless something snaps, which it often does. You try to help by lifting a basket, but every movement feels like it jiggles the pie deeper into your core. You're not sure how long you sit there, listening to your organs reevaluate their contracts. You burp once and feel a vision coming on. There's a child playing with a stick shaped like a sword, and you wonder if this is how it ends, not with a battle, but with a badly labeled pastry and some warm, haunted beer. By evening, the sun starts to dip, but your nausea refuses to. You walk in small, deliberate circles, hoping motion will help. It does not. A dog sniffs you and decides better. Even Barnabas the goat, who once claimed your sleeve in open combat, steers clear. Someone asks how you liked the pie. You smile weakly and say it was filling. They nod, satisfied. Then they mention, as an afterthought, that it's best eaten before the meat turns. You blink. Before? You ask very carefully when exactly the meat in your pie turned. They laugh and say, well, the butcher's boy went missing 3 days ago, so we're back to last week's stores. You stare at them. You stare at your hands. You stare at the horizon, which offers no answers, only more sky and the distant promise of gastrointestinal vengeance. Midnight is coming, and it's bringing consequences. You spot someone roughly your age, which in this village could mean anywhere from 15 to 40, depending on dental structure and level of visible trauma. They're leaning against a fence that's more theoretical than structural, idly whittling a stick into what might eventually become a smaller stick. They have the sort of face that suggests they've already seen 3 wars, 2 hauntings, and 1 extremely suspicious turnip. You approach slowly, wearing what you hope is a friendly, non-threatening smile. It feels like the kind of moment that could blossom into camaraderie, or at least a passing nod of mutual survival. You say hello. Just that hello. 1 word. Warm. Inviting. They grunt. It is not a welcoming grunt. It is the kind of grunt that says, I have buried people for less. They turn and walk away, with no sense of urgency, just the steady, confident pace of someone who has already decided you're not worth the calories of continued existence. You stand there, hand still slightly raised, smile frozen in place like a wax figure of social failure. You try again later, this time with someone carrying firewood. She looks less threatening, possibly even kind. Her shawl doesn't seem cursed. You wave and offer your name. She narrows her eyes, as if trying to determine whether your existence is a test from God or a prank from the forest. She does not ask your name in return. She asks, instead, are you French? The question lands with the weight of hidden history. You pause. Your mouth opens, but nothing intelligent comes out. You are suddenly aware that there may not be a correct answer. Saying yes could mean betrayal. Saying no could still mean betrayal. You don't know what year it is. You don't know which war is happening. All you know is that she's holding an axe, and her tone suggests she has used it on more than firewood. You say, not exactly. She raises an eyebrow. The air tenses. A nearby chicken senses conflict and wanders away. You quickly add that you come from a distant place, far off, with mountains. Yes, mountains. And cows. You say it like it's a passport. You smile again, which feels risky. She squints at you like she's trying to see if your soul's wearing a disguise. Sounds French, she says. You thank her for the conversation, retreating like a defeated diplomat. She watches you go. You're not sure if you've passed the test or just been filed away as possibly dangerous, mostly useless. By the time you reach the edge of the square, a small group of children has gathered to throw pebbles near your feet. Not at you, just near you, which is somehow worse. It's not aggression, it's judgment. They don't even laugh. One just mutters, witch adjacent, and runs off. You spend the next hour pretending to be interested in wood piles and oxen, hoping someone will mistake you for a normal, functioning peasant. But no one makes eye contact. A man walks past and whispers something that sounds like French goat whisperer, and now you're not sure which part of that is worse. You attempt one last social interaction before dusk, joining a group of people standing around a barrel. You ask what they're talking about. One turns, looks you up and down and says, "Plague." You nod, wisely. "Ah." They continue staring. You back away slowly. As the sun sets and the cold sets in, you sit beside Barnabas the goat, who at least acknowledges your presence with a sniff. You speak softly to him, as one outcast to another. He does not headbutt you this time, which feels like growth. A nearby woman walks by, sees you muttering to the goat, and crosses herself with impressive speed. You are now known by many names. None of them are friend. They spot you before you spot them. A gaggle of medieval children, barefoot, slightly sticky, and possessed of the kind of raw, chaotic energy typically reserved for locusts and minor demons. They emerge from behind a crumbling wall. A pack of them, faces streaked with something that may be dirt or war paint or both. One of them is gnawing on what looks like a twig. Another has an eye patch, but you suspect it's purely for aesthetic. You try to appear friendly. You give a little wave, which is apparently a signal for attack. The one in front, clearly the ringleader, raises a stick like a battle standard and screams, something unintelligible. The others scream back, more for fun than strategy. And then, the chase begins. You run, not quickly, and not well, because your shoes were not built for this century or this terrain. One of them slaps your leg with a reed. Another hurls a clump of mud with perfect medieval accuracy. It hits you square in the cheek, earthy and wet and deeply personal. You pause, wiping your face, trying to establish some kind of adult authority. This is a mistake. They surround you. You hold up your hands and try to reason with them, asking what this is all about. One child asks if you're a bandit. Another asks if you're a ghost. A third just grabs your sleeve and yells, "He has soft hands," as though that alone is proof of your treachery. You attempt to explain yourself, but mid-sentence, someone takes your shoe. Just takes it. You don't even see who. It vanishes like hope in a storm. You spin around, looking for your footwear and your dignity, but all you see is laughter and small darting feet. A girl, no older than 7, points at you and asks if you're cursed or just naturally unlucky. It's not even mean, the way she says it. It's academic. She genuinely wants to know what kind of disaster you are. You say you're not cursed. No one believes you. A boy snorts and says, "That's what a cursed person would say." And now the group is murmuring in agreement. They begin to debate your origins like you're a local legend that wandered out of a fairy tale and forgot how doors work. One suggests you were raised by wolves, but not the clever kind. Another thinks you're a royal exile, banished for failing to ride a horse properly. You don't correct them, mostly because one of them is now braiding something into your hair and you fear what happens if you move. Eventually, the oldest among them, a preteen with the expression of a retired soldier, calls a ceasefire. She declares you unthreatening, possibly an omen, but not a dangerous one. More like a walking cautionary tale. The others nod solemnly and disperse, off to find new prey or mud or wild berries, or presumably the next person to psychologically dismantle. You're left with one shoe, damp socks, and a new understanding of power dynamics. Your hair smells faintly of moss. You walk back through the village with twigs in your collar and judgment in every eye that passes. Someone asks what happened. You say, "Children." They nod, knowingly. You don't mean to step on the chicken. It just happens. One moment you're walking through the yard, minding your own modern-era business, and the next, there's a squawk, a flurry of feathers, and the kind of accusatory glare that says lawsuits would be filed if this century had them. The chicken doesn't scream so much as it issues a statement, loudly, publicly. You back away with your hands up like the poultry police are on their way. The chicken continues to squawk after you're gone. You can still hear it down the road. You are fairly certain it's telling the others, and the others are listening. You attempt to make amends by helping round up the pigs. This feels redemptive, noble even. You imagine yourself becoming a kind of rustic hero, swine whisperer, redeemed foot stomper turned local legend. That fantasy lasts roughly 4 seconds, which is exactly how long it takes for the pig to look at you. Not just glance. Look. Deeply. With eyes that say you have already failed some test you didn't know you were taking. You lunge anyway. It does not run. It waits. It lets you get close enough to believe, and then it pivots with shocking elegance and waddles off in a direction that implies mockery. You chase it again. It speeds up, almost gleefully. It's not escaping. It's performing. And you are the audience. The pig is now prancing through mud like a dancer in a tragic opera. You trip on a root. The pig watches. Later, you sit near the barn, trying to collect what's left of your dignity. A cat appears, as if summoned by your despair. You reach out. Slowly, gently. You whisper a greeting, like you've seen in movies where animals magically trust people who are kind or lonely or vaguely chosen. The cat blinks once, expressionless, then turns around so you can get a good, clear view of its tail as it walks directly away and disappears into a haystack without a sound. That hurts more than the root did. You hear a rustling above you. You look up. The rooster is on the roof. You don't know how it got there. You don't know how long it's been watching. It crows loudly, right as you attempt to stand. The noise startles you. You fall back down. The rooster crows again. Shorter this time. Tighter. It feels pointed. That night, while everyone else eats in quiet exhaustion, you catch a goat staring at you from the doorway. Just standing there, watching. You blink. It doesn't. You think about calling someone over, but by the time you do, the goat has left. You're not sure if it was real. You wonder, briefly, if this is how madness begins. By dusk, you find yourself walking the perimeter of the village, glancing at shadows. The animals don't follow you, not directly, but you feel watched. You pass a dog. It growls. Not viciously, just enough to make a point. A cow moos at you in a tone that could mean anything from hello to you have offended the balance. The horse in the stable refuses to meet your eyes. It is starting to feel coordinated. You consider apologizing to the air, to the barn, to whatever god of beasts now holds your fate in its hoofed, clawed, or feathered grasp. You whisper, "I'm sorry," and a sheep bleats at you like it's heard worse, but not much worse. You return to your straw mattress that smells like wet dreams deferred and lie very still. Somewhere outside, something rustles. You pull the blanket over your head and try not to think about the fact that the chicken you stepped on hasn't been seen since noon. You're beginning to think it's planning something. You were just trying to be polite. That's how it starts. A smile, innocent, non-committal, possibly charming if the lighting's generous and no one's wearing glasses, which they aren't, because it's the 14th century and corrective lenses are a luxury reserved for monks and sorcerers. You smile at a woman who hands you a ladle. She smiles back. It's a wholesome moment. Unfortunately, she's married. Even more unfortunately, she's married to the man currently sharpening a knife with the kind of focus that suggests unresolved emotional tension and a deep loyalty to outdated codes of honor. You don't know he's her husband. You don't know that this village treats eye contact like a proposal and smiling like a binding agreement. All you know is that suddenly, it's very quiet. Someone drops a wooden spoon. Somewhere behind you, a sheep bleats in alarm. The woman is gone. The husband is not. You back away slowly, hands raised like you're surrendering to a deeply medieval form of justice, which, as it turns out, you are. You try to change the subject. You gesture to the altar in the corner of the hall and say something about how lovely it is, hoping to shift attention to the aesthetics of spiritual decor. This is how you touch it. The sacred object, the one you're not supposed to touch, breathe on, or look directly at unless you've fasted for 3 days and been blessed by someone with at least 3 visible bones hanging from their belt. You touch it like it's a centerpiece at a rustic wedding. You tap it. A woman gasps. A child begins to cry. You try to sit down and make yourself small, hoping that if you fold enough of yourself inward, you can become invisible, or at least ignorable. You choose a bench. The bench, as it turns out, the one reserved for someone called Brother Aldrich, who, by all accounts, has not spoken in 10 years, but will absolutely throw a person into a moat for touching his seat. You shift left. Too late. A wrinkled hand clamps onto your shoulder. You look up into the eyes of someone who once strangled a wolf and hasn't stopped shaking since. At this point, the room is buzzing. Not with conversation, no, these are murmurs, sacred and grim. The sort of sound made when a prophecy is being fulfilled in real time and no one is excited about it. The priest arrives. He is sweating. Not dramatically, but deliberately, like he's trying to expel your sins through sheer proximity. He touches his beads. He does not touch you. You're asked to explain yourself. You begin to say you're from out of town, which is both true and the worst possible answer. The term outsider is whispered like a curse. Someone spits. Someone else crosses themselves 3 times and knocks over a pew. The phrase trial by soup is mentioned. You laugh because it sounds like a joke. It is not a joke. Trial by soup, as you learn quickly, involves a pot, a stone, and the ability to retrieve said stone without dying of burns or spiritual disgrace. It is unclear if anyone has survived. It is even less clear if the soup is edible. It smells like justice and root vegetables. You apologize. You apologize so thoroughly, so desperately, that your modern dignity dissolves into a slurry of bowing, hand gestures, and an offer to milk something, anything, just to make this stop. Eventually, an elder with a beard like a mop and the authority of a hungover wizard declares you a fool, but not a wicked one. This is apparently the best-case scenario. The pot is removed. The priest still looks uneasy. The woman's husband still sharpens his knife, but now with less focus. You are told to eat outside. You do. Alone, quietly, surrounded by chickens. You don't smile at anyone for the rest of the day. You are told it's time for church, which sounds benign enough. You imagine a small chapel, some candles, maybe a choir humming, gently in the background, while old men nod solemnly at walls. What you get is 3 miles of muddy walking, a swarm of midges that seem particularly interested in your ears, and the hollow-eyed march of people who look like they've already confessed everything worth confessing, and now just show up out of obligation and fear. The church looms ahead like a punishment. Its stone walls tilt slightly, like they're tired of holding it all together. The bell doesn't ring so much as wheeze, and the doorway is only wide enough for one unfortunate soul at a time. Inside smells like wet wood, damp wool, and centuries of whispered sins. You shuffle in behind a man with a back like a question mark and try to look reverent. You do not succeed. The benches are not made for human bodies. They're made for testing the resilience of tailbones and spirit. You sit on one that looks the least threatening. It creaks ominously. A woman in a veil hisses. Apparently, you've chosen the place of someone important, possibly noble, or maybe just extremely superstitious and armed. You apologize in a whisper. She does not acknowledge it. She stares forward as though this is your trial, and she's here to watch justice unfold. The priest arrives. He is shaped like a broom, and twice as judgmental. His robe is too long. His beard is too thin. His voice, however, is booming. It bounces off the stone like it's trying to escape. He begins the sermon in Latin, then switches abruptly to a dialect you're not sure is English or just aggressive muttering. Either way, you don't understand a word. It goes on, and on, and on. You try to stay awake. You really do. You blink rapidly. You pinch your arm. You breathe deeply through your mouth in a way that makes the woman beside you flinch like you've just summoned plague. But your body has had enough. Your knees ache. Your stomach is a hollow drum of disappointment. And your brain, your sweet, Exhausted brain just quietly shuts the door on consciousness. You fall asleep. You do not do it gracefully. There is no gentle nodding or polite slumping. You collapse like a bag of laundry, head tipping back, mouth opening slightly, a small but distinct snore escaping from somewhere deep within your ancestral shame. It echoes. The priest stops speaking. You remain asleep, floating in a dream where you are warm, fed, and far from this building of heavy glances and invisible rules. Then, someone kicks your shin. You jolt awake, confused, your body insisting it's still Tuesday, and your mind trying to remember how to spell penance. The priest is staring at you. So is everyone else. He doesn't say your name, he doesn't know it, but he points at you with a finger like an accusatory icicle and mutters something about the signs. The crowd nods slowly. The woman next to you crosses herself and shifts a fraction of an inch farther away. A child whispers the word, hexed. No one is exactly sure what it means, but it's agreed upon unanimously that it's not ideal. The sermon resumes, but it's no longer about humility or harvests. It's about vigilance, about false sleepers, about listening for the whispers of the enemy and the snores of the inattentive. You keep your eyes open the entire time, wide and unblinking, unsure if blinking counts as disrespect or a gateway to further possession. When it's finally over, you try to leave quickly. The crowd parts, slightly. You feel like a strange dog walking through a flock of suspicious geese. Someone pats you on the shoulder in a way that might be comforting or possibly an attempt at spiritual quarantine. You vow never to sit again. The idea strikes you in a flash of desperate genius, somewhere between your fourth spoonful of boiled sadness and the moment a child pelts you with a surprisingly well-aimed turnip. You will leave. You will escape. You will forge a new path in the wide, medieval world, beyond this village of questionable hygiene and emotional livestock. You tell no one, not because you're stealthy, but because no one listens to you anyway. You pack a sack. It contains a hunk of bread that could double as masonry, a questionable apple, and a wooden spoon you stole from the communal pile like a thief with poor ambitions. You wrap yourself in a cloak that smells like wet hay and unfulfilled dreams. You step into the early dusk, filled with purpose, dread, and the creeping suspicion that you're going to do this wrong. The road greets you with the enthusiasm of a boot to the face. It's not a road, exactly more of a suggestion, a ribbon of mud winding through trees that all look like they witnessed a murder and never recovered. Your boots, which were never truly boots to begin with, absorb water at a spiritual level. Each step is a squelch of diminishing hope. The sky spits on you. It's not quite rain, not quite mist. It's like the atmosphere itself is sweating in your direction. You walk. You think of freedom. You think of London, or at least somewhere with a tavern and fewer geese. You imagine telling stories of your escape to awed villagers, perhaps while wearing a hat of power. You try to whistle. It comes out as a wheeze. Something howls in the woods, and it's not poetic. It sounds hungry and annoyed. That's when you meet Gregor. You do not mean to. You are trying to avoid eye contact with a tree that looks vaguely judgy when he lurches out from behind it. Gregor is a man, allegedly. He has hair like a disheveled mop, a beard that's home to several small bugs, and possibly a bird, and eyes that have seen too much, or perhaps not enough. He points at you, then he points at a tree. Then he begins screaming at the tree about taxes. You freeze. You consider going around. Gregor follows. You try to offer him your apple. He throws a mushroom at your chest and calls you a sky witch. You're not sure what that is, but it doesn't sound like something the villagers would approve of. Gregor continues yelling. You run. The road, such as it is, becomes a pit. You don't fall in, exactly. You descend into it slowly, with the grace of a reluctant potato. Mud sucks at your legs like it's been lonely. Your bread brick is lost in the mire. Your spoon breaks in half. You hear another howl, closer this time. You decide, with a clarity reserved for the doomed, that you are not wilderness material. You crawl out. You limp back. When the village comes into view, it feels less like a prison and more like the slightly cleaner corner of purgatory. No one notices your return. One person hands you a turnip like it's a peace offering. A goat glares at you like it remembers. It probably does. You find your hay pile. It smells worse now. You lie down and stare at the rafters, which might fall on you at any moment out of pity. You tried to escape. You failed. This is your life now. Bad porridge, goat-based trauma, occasional trial by soup. You are not strong. You are not clever. You are just here. And you're pretty sure Gregor still thinks you're in charge of taxes. There is a town meeting. You are not invited. You are simply told, later, by a woman with 3 teeth and a suspiciously joyful tone, that they've found something for you to do. This sounds promising for approximately 2 seconds, until she adds, "You'll be the dung man now." You wait for laughter, for someone to jump out and say it's a joke, but all you get is a pat on the back and a shovel that has seen things. Terrible, brown things. The villagers smile at you with the collective satisfaction of people who have just offloaded a burden. It is the smile of a child passing a screaming baby to someone else and running. It is the smile of a tax collector who has found a new victim. It is not a good smile. Your job is simple, they say. Walk the path. Gather what the animals leave behind. Horses, cows, sheep, goats, and anything else that has the audacity to exist and excrete. Transport it out of the streets and into the communal pile, which is located far too close to the well for comfort. You are given no gloves. You are given no boots. You are given what is generously called a tunic and realistically called a rag with ambition. The first pile mocks you. It sits there, smug and steaming. You approach like a man confronting his own destiny and not liking the look of it. You scoop. You gag. You try to breathe through your mouth, which turns out to be worse. Your eyes water. Your soul whispers a quiet, angry, "Why?" You are told to sing as you work, to let people know you're coming, so they don't step in it, they say, as though the entire village has not already been tramping through waste with the enthusiasm of a parade. You try humming. It sounds mournful. A child joins in with a drum made of bones. You are unsure whether to be touched or unnerved. By midday, you smell like a battlefield no one won. You are slipping more than walking, the mud and worse forming an alliance against your dignity. At one point, you step too confidently on what you think is dry ground. It is not. It is betrayal. You fall, slow motion and tragic, landing with a squelch that echoes across the square. Silence follows. Then laughter. Loud, communal, cathartic laughter. Even the goat laughs. You didn't know goats could laugh, but this one does, and it changes you. They start calling you Stinky Tom. You correct them. Your name isn't Tom. They nod, smile, and then say it louder. "Oi, Stinky Tom's back," one of them shouts as you drag your shame through the gate. A woman offers you a turnip like it's some kind of prize. The blacksmith smirks and says, "You've found your calling." You briefly consider launching the turnip at his head, but lack the energy and self-worth. You sit by the fire that night, alone, because no one will sit next to you, not even the village dog, who once ate a boot and survived. Your tunic is unsalvageable. Your hair has absorbed the scent of your labor. Your hands are stained with the truth of this place. You have become one with the muck, and yet, in a cruel twist of acceptance, you realize you might finally be fitting in. Not as a hero, not as a friend, but as a smell, as a legend, as a warning. You are Stinky Tom now, and Stinky Tom has work in the morning. You see her at the well. She's fetching water like it's a ballet, graceful and efficient, not a drop spilled. Her scarf is the color of faded marigolds, and her sleeves are rolled in that casually heroic way that suggests she knows how to skin a rabbit and win a fistfight. You, For reasons unknown even to yourself, decide this is the moment to flirt. You approach with all the confidence of a damp towel. You clear your throat. She glances at you like she's trying to determine whether you're an actual person or just another hallucination sent by the turnip wine. You say something about her eyes. You think it's charming, maybe poetic, possibly not even entirely coherent. It comes out sounding like a compliment, if compliments were invented by someone who had never met a human before. There is silence. Her grandmother materializes from behind a cart like a vengeful forest spirit. She does not speak. She hisses, long and low, like a kettle about to blow or a snake who's seen things. Her eyes say leave, and her posture says or be turned into soup. You take a respectful half-step back. Her mother is less subtle. She emerges from a nearby doorway with the precision of a military ambush and throws a sandal at your head. It connects. You are stunned by the force and by the realization that medieval footwear, while poorly designed for comfort, is spectacularly effective as a missile. You try to speak, but she's already shouting something about tainted moon blood and village shame, and you're not sure if that's about you or just a general family motto. The girl, your original target, your muse, your fleeting dream of medieval companionship laughs. Not a flirty giggle, not a shy chuckle. A full-bodied, wheezing, knee-slapping laugh, like you've just done a pratfall into pig slop. It goes on for a while. At one point, she leans on the well for support. You feel something inside you wilt. You decide to leave. Not with a bow, not with a flourish, but with the hunched, rapid shuffle of someone trying to exit a bad idea while preserving what little remains of their soul. You step directly into a puddle on the way out. It's deep. It's cold. It soaks into your sock and fills your shoe with immediate, swampy despair. You don't move. You just stand there in the puddle, marinating in shame and increasingly questionable water. Someone walks by and nods at you, like this is the most reasonable thing they've seen all week. You hear a goat in the distance, judging you. A child passes and whispers, "Stinky Tom tried to love." You wish that weren't your legacy, but there it is, spreading like fire through dry gossip. Later, at the communal dinner, no one sits beside you. Not because you smell, though you still do, but because you are now the village tragedy. You're the reason a new rule is invented about flirting protocol. A rule that is literally carved into a wooden plaque and nailed to the side of the well. You eat your gruel slowly. It tastes like defeat and someone else's oat sadness. Across the square, the girl waves. It is unclear if she means it kindly or ironically. You wave back anyway, because you're nothing if not a romantic. A soggy, sandal-battered romantic. You are ushered into the feast hall, or what qualifies as one here, which is really more of a large barn with aspirations. The ceiling drips slightly. The benches tilt in a way that suggests long-term betrayal. A dog is already under the table, eyeing you with the weary suspicion of someone who's seen newcomers weep into their soup. There's excitement in the air, which concerns you immediately. A dinner celebration in this village usually precedes illness or trial, or both. The table is set with the full medieval spectrum. Bowls that smell faintly of moss, spoons whittled into aggressive shapes, and cups that still have something mysterious crusted to the rim. You sit. Your legs go numb almost instantly because the bench is aggressively unpadded and actively hostile. A man with 3 fingers and no teeth offers you a grin and a slab of something he calls meat. You hesitate. It wobbles. You're not sure meat is supposed to do that. You press your fork well, stick with prongs into it, and it shudders like it remembers life. The surface is gray. The inside is grayer. You ask what kind of animal it is. The man says, "It's not." Then he laughs and slaps your back, which somehow makes it worse. Next is the bread. It is circular and dense enough to affect gravity. Someone cuts a slice with a hatchet. It takes 2 tries. The crust could deflect arrows. You bite down. A tooth sings its death song. Across the table, a woman uses her bread to hammer a nail into the wall. Successfully. Then there's the stew. Always the stew. It arrives with a smell best described as historical. You fish out a chunk and stare at it for a full minute, hoping it will identify itself. It does not. You chew. It resists. It might be root vegetable. It might be cloth. Either way, it has a vengeance in its texture. The ale is brought out in a wooden jug that leaks slightly from the bottom. You pour some into your cup. It foams in a concerning way. You take a sip. It tastes like something that was once beer, then changed careers midlife and became a solvent. Your lips sting. Your tongue retreats. Your stomach begins composing its final words. You try to pace yourself. You pretend to chew. You smile when others do. You laugh when someone tells a joke you don't understand because it's in dialect and possibly also a curse. You nod when an old man points at your bowl and says something about digestive preparation. You don't ask what that means. You fear the answer. Suddenly, a toast is declared. Everyone raises their cups and shouts something that sounds celebratory, but could just as easily be a warning. You drink. A mistake. The warmth of the ale settles in your stomach like a boulder dipped in vinegar. You feel your organs blinking slowly, like they're considering unionizing. Dessert arrives. It's a turnip. That's it. Just a raw, small turnip. You accept it solemnly. You do not bite it. You name it Harold and keep it in your pocket. Harold has done nothing to you. As the evening drags on, the candles sputter, and the dog under the table begins licking your leg with grim determination. A bard starts playing something stringed and out of tune, and you stare down at your bowl, which now has a film forming on the surface. It moves when you breathe. You begin to understand why no one here lives past 30. You also begin to understand why everyone talks to their goats. There is something about this meal, about the ambient dampness, the mysterious meat, the slow realization that you have somehow consumed something with hooves that makes you feel like you're slowly being exorcised by dinner itself. You don't remember leaving. You just wake up later, flat on your back in the hay, Harold cradled gently in your hand. Your stomach makes a sound like an approaching storm. Something distant howls. It might be you. And dinner isn't even over yet. The sun dies slowly over the village, like it's doing you a personal favor, bleeding pink across the sky as the cold starts to slide in. You think perhaps the day is finally over, that maybe, just maybe, you can collapse somewhere and pretend this entire time period didn't happen. But this is the Middle Ages. Night isn't rest. It's just a second shift. There is no bath. You ask where one might rinse off. A woman points at a bucket and says, "Share with the chickens." You laugh. She doesn't. The water inside smells like betrayal. It's gray. It's floating things. And it's cold enough to make your skeleton consider relocating. You splash a little on your face and immediately long for the sting of modern soap and the comfort of high water pressure. You make peace with filth. You stumble into what they claim is sleeping quarters. It's not. It's a wooden coffin of a room with hay for a floor and a vague sense of dread in the air. There's a pile of cloth in the corner that might be a blanket or a very flat horse. You lie down. Something moves. You lie on the other side. Something squeaks. You stop lying down and simply hover in emotional paralysis. The fleas introduce themselves quickly. They are assertive. They are confident. They have goals and families and a thriving nightlife on your ankles. You scratch. It doesn't help. You scratch more. You consider tearing your entire skin off and living as a well-meaning skeleton. You think about modern mattresses, foam layers, adjustable firmness, lavender-scented memory pads, and you nearly weep. Mice scurry past your head like they're late for appointments. One stops to stare at you. You think you see pity in its eyes. Then it keeps running and you hear it join a very heated argument between two rats under the floorboards. Something crashes. Something else squeals. This is apparently normal. Someone is whispering to the moon outside your door. You don't know if it's prayer, poetry or a warning. The cadence is soothing until it suddenly isn't, and then it becomes deeply personal and aggressively aimed at the moon's betrayal in a matter involving stolen turnips. You pretend you didn't hear. The moon does not reply. In the next room, a man begins sobbing, loudly, repeatedly. He's chanting something about soup. You catch the words, too thin, and betrayed by carrots, and then it devolves into guttural wailing. No one checks on him. This, too, is apparently normal. You try to sleep. You truly try. You close your eyes and count sheep. Only the sheep here are thin and hostile and prone to biting. You breathe deeply, but the air is thick with the scent of mildew, onions, and low expectations. Your body aches from doing nothing well all day. Your soul aches for central heating. Your thoughts spiral. You remember microwaves and how they hum like a lullaby. You remember the warm glow of a refrigerator light at midnight. You remember blankets that didn't smell like anxiety and weren't crawling with bugs that had names. You remember sinks. You cry a little. The crying man is now singing to his soup. You roll onto your side and a stick pokes you directly in the kidney. A flea bites your ear in solidarity. You consider escape again. You consider yelling. You consider time travel. You consider fire. Instead, you lie perfectly still, staring at the roof, as a spider descends with the slow confidence of someone who knows you won't stop it. The moon disappears behind a cloud. The mice cheer. You are not asleep, but you are no longer awake either. You exist now, in the crack between suffering and resignation. The Middle Ages hum their lullaby of discomfort. You close your eyes, and you dream. Not of flying, or freedom, or romance. You dream of indoor plumbing. The final straw is not, as you expected, the rats, or the soup man, or even the goat that keeps showing up like a debt collector. No, it's the moment your last piece of bread crumbles in your hand before it reaches your mouth, disintegrating like your hope. You watch it fall to the dirt floor, mixing with straw, despair, and something that might be fermented turnip. You stare at the remains and something inside you quietly shuts off, like a candle getting snuffed by the wind. You don't scream, you don't fight, you don't curse the sky or challenge the moon to a duel. You simply walk to the hearth, lower yourself with the grace of a fallen wardrobe, and fold into the fetal position like a sad croissant. There is no fire in the hearth. There is only ash. Somehow, this feels appropriate. You mutter, not prayers, not apologies, but phrases from a world that no longer exists. "Can I speak to your manager?" You whisper. The Wi-Fi's down. This meeting could have been an email. Each phrase hits the air like a forgotten relic, and the villagers don't understand the words, but they understand the tone. You've surrendered. Completely. A child wanders past and tosses a potato at your foot in what might be an offering or a dare. A man pokes your shoulder with a stick, waits, then nods in solemn approval. An old woman places a wool blanket over your twitching form and whispers, "Let it be." You don't know if it's meant kindly or if she's just warning the others to leave you alone before you explode like an emotional pomegranate. No one asks you to work. No one tries to involve you in laundry or pig herding or rituals involving herbs and accidental fire. The blacksmith walks by and does not mock your weak arms. The priest does not throw water on you. Even the goat maintains a respectful distance, chewing ominously but without direct eye contact. You've become a fixture now, like the warped door frame or the smell of cabbage, part of the scenery. The strange figure who came from nowhere, flailed dramatically for a full day, and then collapsed like a haunted marionette. They call you the soft one, not unkindly, just accurately. Someone drapes a turnip necklace over your neck. It smells like moist soil and community acceptance. You let it stay. You're not asleep, but you're not fully awake either. It's more of a passive existence, a quiet buffering screen of the soul. Occasionally, you hum the jingle of a 90 seconds fast food commercial to yourself for comfort. No one minds. The soup man sings along. At one point, a chicken sits on your back. You allow it. This is your life now. The sun starts to rise again, staining the sky with orange and mockery, and you realize you've survived. Technically, you are still alive. Mentally, unclear. Dignity? Absolutely not. But breathing counts for something. The villagers seem pleased, not impressed, but satisfied, like they've watched someone complete a very messy rite of passage that involved more mud and public weeping than usual. You've earned a sort of twisted respect, not because you adapted, but because you broke in a way that made sense to them. You are now one of them, spiritually, if not hygienically. You close your eyes as the goat snorts near your ear. You hear someone offer you more porridge. You do not answer. You've made it 24 hours in the Middle Ages. Barely, but barely still counts.